Hello, good evening. Welcome to tonight's Last Call, super secret Sunday system stream. My name is Derek Melinda, and I am excited to be hanging out with you. What I imagine will be a fairly small and intimate group of people who are not only here on a Sunday, but also here to talk about Avatar Legends, the PBTA game from Magpie Games. It came out a couple years ago, I think 2022. And we talked about Avatar Legends about a year ago, 6 months ago, last summer, and we went over some of the basic concepts around PBTA, which are always a lot of people still need a lot of hand-holding with, which is fine. I get it. It's a it's a complicated game. It has a lot of moving pieces and parts, so I understand that there is a natural need to sort of go over some of those basics, and then but we talked about the basic moves, and we've talked about these on other systems, Root, Avatar. The basic moves are like the primary skeletal structure which holds up a particular PBTA game. So if you missed our previous Avatar stream and you want to go back and look at it, just look for it on our channel. Maybe I could put a link to it in the description below here after this live stream, and you can kind of see where we're at with other components of Avatar and the PBT games in particular. However, tonight we've had some interest from some of our patrons to have another Avatar stream. And I think this is also just generically useful for anybody who's playing a PBTA game. That being said, a lot of what we're going to focus on tonight is fairly specific to this particular instance of Powered by the Apocalypse. And when Magpie created Avatar, they chose to include some sort of rather unique takes on what is the sort of traditional PBTA. I know PBTA isn't a system, but sort of the traditional PBTA framework. They added some additional components to it, I think, to do a really good job of making the game what we would sometimes call true role-playing, but some people have a problem with that. So sort of mechanical role-playing, which is to say a game engine or system in which the mechanics and the role-playing are sort of one and the same. And Avatar Legends does this very well. Some people might find it a little bit burdensome, but I think if you play the game, you'll discover that these mechanical constraints, they are constraints, because what they do is they promote, encourage, and dare I say, kind of constrict you or restrain you into creating Avatar-like stories. So this is an instance where the mechanics of the game aren't, forcing you to level up at a certain rate or be able to take out a certain monster at a certain level with a certain CR. No, this game's mechanics are doing something very differently. They are enforcing the tropes, the genre, and the core ideals of what it is to be Avatar. And so as a result, by following the rules of the game, you will end up with characters and stories that feel like they belong maybe in an episode of Avatar or the comic book. So that is kind of the intention of these mechanics, and we'll kind of talk about them. Let's say hello to everybody. Again, we're going to have I'm assuming we're going to have a fairly small stream tonight, but we do have two tip goals. Our super chats is just showing your support for these Sunday super streams as sort of part of the package. You guys get me and sometimes Bob and Smith every Tuesdays and Thursday. But, these Sunday streams are an extra opportunity for me to hang out and cover some additional topics. But, of course, it's always nice to see that support so that we can keep doing them. And then this kind of just came up today, but as our tip goal, somebody was talking about the Birthright campaign setting. And I thought, maybe it'll be cool. Maybe I can see if there's interest in doing a retrospective look, a new series where we look at old AD&D 2nd edition campaign settings. I'm talking Forgotten Realms, Dark Sun, Council of Worms, Mystara, Birthright, Dragonlance, Ravenloft, Greyhawk. I'm sure I forgot one. And maybe it'd be fun to kind of, go through those. So those are what our two goals are tonight. But, generally speaking, we're here just to hang out. So I appreciate any support. And, of course, thank you to our patrons who support us. That's why I'm here, because we were talking about that. Pepper says hello. Hello, Pepper. Good evening to you, Mr. Boothbay. Friendly neighborhood Spider Matt says evening. Hello to you. This is the second time I've been able to catch a stream live. Excited to talk about Avatar. Well, fantastic. Let me know your thoughts, comments, questions in the chat. I will make sure to get to them. And our good friend Cal is coming out earlier. How much money do I have to donate for free market? You teased it, Derek. You can't just leave me hanging. Well, the thing you have to remember here, Cal, is that it'll be me and you and maybe 5 other people who really like Luke Crane, and that'll be it in the entire stream. But listen, I am nothing but I am a cog in the wheel of this vast free enterprise system that we call capitalism. I'd love to talk about free market almost more as a troll, like to see, is it possible for me to get negative views on a YouTube stream? But really, honestly, what it comes down to is, obviously we have a couple hundred patrons, and I try to keep everybody happy and with the polls, but maybe that is a Sunday stream in the future. Maybe we can find some space for it. I'd love to, just because I want to see people's minds melt when they're presented with this game. But thank you, Cal. Thank you. Voin is here. Hello. Bob forgot his core duty, which is running our March Madness tournament. TTTRPG March Madness. What is up, KC? What is up? Gonza says Mystara is his favorite. I love Mystara. I think Mystara is very cool. Very classic. I forgot Planescape and Spelljammer. I can't believe I forgot Planescape. Ron Rittner says, I got them all. Yeah, it's very nice, Ron. Glad you're back from Peru. Vegas in 10 days, buddy. Sail away. Hello. Zerverus, good evening to you as well. Duran's Cat says, I don't know what free market is, but I keep hearing about it, and I would like to learn what it is. It is the weirdest role-playing game that you will ever encounter in your life. And it's almost impossible to play because you basically need the box set to be able to play it. It has like a deck of cards and a bunch of other crazy shit. And I'm assuming that there's very few of these things out there. And those people that have them maybe not be selling them. So anyways, yeah. It is. It's Luke Crane at his finest, in my personal opinion. You like Luke Crane, but you don't know about free market, so obviously I should cover it. Yes, the air of mystery will draw people in. Here we are trying to talk about Avatar Legends. Now we're getting sucked into Luke Crane and free market. Jason asks, as he always does, what is this? We are talking about Avatar Legends. Constraints are so important. Effective implementation for core rules and character creation enable great storytelling. I agree. Point blank. Hello. Gonza. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, if you've ever read Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, which is a book by Cory Doctorow. It's sort of a Creative Commons release book. It's not that long. It's more of like a short story, like a long short story. Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, or if you haven't read Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, if you've ever seen the Black Mirror episode with Bryce Dallas Howard, it's called Nosedive. It's the one where she lives in a society where whenever you meet people, right, they can like upvote you or downvote you. Or if you haven't seen any of those, if you saw the Community episode with Meow Meow Beans, all of those basic premises and plots are basically what is occurring in free market, where essentially likes and dislikes are the currency. Nobody needs money. Everything is provided for you. Everything is free. And so when everything is free and you have all of your needs met, what kind of currency do you use? And the answer is you use basically social currency. You use likes and dislikes. And I don't remember what the dislikes are called, but in free market, the like is called an attaboy. And so you can, you're doing stuff just to, I don't know, get attaboys and become popular and try to avoid getting frownies. That's what they're called, attaboys and frownies. And so basically they're likes and dislikes. And you just kind of, I don't know, do shit to do shit. And that's the premise of the game. So it's a post-scarcity world where with advanced technology, you can be downloaded and cloned. You can have, anything. Death is pretty much irrelevant. So anyways, that's the case. GM Scott can't stay, but wanted to say hi. No, GM Scott, you're never busy on Sundays. What the hell's going on? Voin had to buy the Eldamon PDF because I love Leshies. It's true. According to the promo code, I do. I got to say, very impressed. I got to still go through that book. I got some time coming up. I've got a flight next week. No, well, not this week coming up, but the following week I have a flight to Vegas. It's about a 5-hour flight. So maybe I'll bring the Eldamon PDF along for some reading because I do think it's worth a good look. Leshy marketing for the win. I got some people who do enjoy that Black Mirror episode. What is up, Jackal Torn Moons? Hello, hello. Battle Zoo Eldamon makes PF2 almost worth investing in. It's a very unique take on the system, and I think it is really cool. And I think they did a great job for that. I mean, if you don't like PF2 or whatever, but then it's not going to do anything for you. But I think it's a really good system. They did a really excellent job with all that. Okay. All right. So, GM Scott, has to leave and do prep. Oh, that's unfortunate. I mean, good that you're going to Florida. I'll be in Vegas. You'll be in Florida. It'll work out really well. All right. So, Avatar. Now, if you have comments, if you have questions, if you want to get into things, please put it in the chat. We'll get to it. And we'll kind of discuss it. But in particular, there's a couple of things that I really wanted to focus on tonight about Avatar Legends. And we'll start by heading over here. So one of the things that I really want to start with here is the idea of balance, because this is something that is new to PBTA, this track. Now, Magpie used something kind of similar in Root with the prestige system, aka how much, did you have positive faction or negative faction with, the Aerie dynasties or the Woodland Alliance. But I think at the fundamental core of Avatar is this idea of characters trying to find their way through the demands of the world around them and find balance. And so Avatar Legends, we're going to describe what the balance system is, and then we're going to talk about how do you use it and why is it a good thing to be used. We'll probably have to bust out the whiteboard here at a certain point. But before we do, let's kind of just talk about what we're looking at right here in terms of the balance. All right. So the first thing that we can see is, of course, it's got the fish from the moon, the spirit well. I don't remember what they're called. They're called like Toi and Kauai or something, but they're like the yin yang, right? So there's this obvious idea there from the Tui and La. Thank you, Pepper. Very, very good. And the basic idea here is that every single playbook. We got a tip coming in.
GM Scott tipped $25. Looking at my shelf. Planescape, Al-Qadim, Ruins of Mythdrana, Forgotten Realms. We skipped Birthright, but I wish we hadn't.
GM Scott, 100%. This is literally what started this tip goal and this conversation. We were talking today about the Birthright setting, and I basically said, my buddy picked it up. I never did. He never did anything with it. And it wasn't until years later where I was like, damn, I can't believe I missed this. I think this would have been totally right up my alley. But I did forget about Al-Qadim. And that alone, that's another interesting one to take a look at. And Ruins of Mythdrana was sort of a sub-campaign setting of Forgotten Realms. I mean, you could argue there was a ton of sub-campaign settings just from the Forgotten Realms. But I will admit, I am a fan of the Forgotten Realms. But not in like, I don't know, not in the modern way. I like the old Forgotten Realms. I don't know if that makes any sense. If you've been around, I like Forgotten Realms of like 3rd edition and 2nd edition. Not so much Forgotten Realms of 4th edition and 5th edition. But thank you, GM Scott. We'll hopefully we can finish this up, and I'd love to start digging into it. I think that'd be a really fun series to go through. Okay. So each of our playbooks, in this case, we have the successor. Each playbook in Avatar Legends is essentially a character arc on a page. And the real question is being asked by the game is, how does your character navigate between these two principles that are sort of tugging and pulling at you? They are your yin and your yang. Because and answering that question and how you answer that question is basically the entire point of the game. And I don't want to put like too firm of a bow on, too convenient and wrapped of a bow of it. But basically, the entire point of an Avatar Legends campaign is the GM and you, because it's a collaborative game, are going to sort of create a challenge, right? A villain, a plan, a dastardly deed. Now, in the first Avatar series, we kind of really just saw one major story arc, which was, can Aang defeat the Fire Lord, right? That was more or less the entire arc of the entire show, all 3 seasons. I mean, there were sub-arcs within it, but for the most part, it was really this question of, can Aang defeat the Fire Lord? Now, in Legend of Korra, they didn't know if each season was basically its own thing because they had no idea if they were going to get renewed. They only got greenlit one season at a time. And so Legend of Korra is much more tightly packed, but each season of Legend of Korra has sort of this core challenge, right? Some sort of villain, whether it's Amon or Unalaq or Zahir or Kuvira. And each of those villains has a plan and sort of, represents a sort of a threat. And it's typically following the tenets of Avatar. It's a threat to balance, and going back to Fire Lord Ozai, Amon, Kuvira, Zahir, right? It's all about threatening balance. And the Avatar's role is to maintain balance. So balance is at the sort of the forefront. But the question that is being put forth in this RPG is, your character is going to be exposed with the fellow PCs to this great series of challenges and risks to the world. And along the way, your character is going to be torn between 2 different principles. In the case of the successor, which is the sort of playbook of the person who, is the prince, right? To maybe a noble kingdom, right? They're torn between following the traditions of their people and making progress. And these are both important things that they want, to have happen. And there's going to be instances where they are trying to overcome these challenges, and they may be forced to have to pick one principle over the other. Now, Pepper says the Zuko playbook. This is 100% the Zuko playbook, okay? And if you think about it, okay, Zuko, throughout the course of the first Avatar series, you see that he starts off with a very, dare I would say, traditionalist view of what it means to be a Fire Nation. He believes in that right, might makes right, that we're going to, that's for the better of the world, that we take over everybody, and that the Avatar needs to be hunted down. And he's very concerned with his father and what his father thinks of him and the traditions of his people. And as the game progresses, what you actually, I think, see is Zuko moving away from tradition and moving towards progress. Now, it should be noted that in most instances in Avatar world, what sort of makes you a villain, and we'll talk about principles from the GM of Avatar, but what makes you a villain in Avatar isn't necessarily that you are evil. Season 2 villain, the Dark Avatar, in many ways was kind of the most, for me, actually, weirdly, sort of one of the most uninteresting villains because it was just evil, right? But if you watch, and to be clear, Fire Lord Ozai was pretty much just monotonically evil. So actually, yes, Fire Lord Ozai and the Dark Avatar, which a lot of people say are their favorite villains from Avatar, are actually my least favorite. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, watching, Aang fight, the Fire Lord is awesome. But in terms of being very interesting, I think Amon and Kuvira and Zahir are way more interesting as villains. And what makes someone kind of a villain in Avatar isn't that they're evil, it's that they are unbalanced. Okay. And the idea here is that anybody who is sort of pushed, right, to one side or another, who cannot see both sides of the story, who cannot understand both roles that these principles play, those are the people who are dangerous, perhaps, because they are, by definition, right, they're extremists. They are extreme to one side or another. And as a result, those characters tend to push the world out of balance. And so there is an idea in Avatar that the true path, or the correct path, is to find your way to the center and find balance. And that is where you can, if you can find a way to do that, then you will have truly succeeded. Now, of course, as I said before, the world, the villains, your allies, your fellow PCs, everything that everyone is doing around you is going to be trying to pull you away from balance. It's going to try to, because the world, achieving balance is difficult. There's kind of maybe a Buddhist ideal there, but achieving balance and managing both, halves of your drives in a balanced fashion is very difficult. And so a lot of the things in the game are going to pull you one way or another. And a lot of times the question is going to be, if you were just trying to seek balance, it would be really easy, right? But we mentioned before, there's also this villain. There is also this threat that you and your fellow party members have to deal with. So in the course of dealing with that villain and dealing with that threat, you may find that your character is being pulled away from balance. And that's okay. That's okay. That's part of your character's story. And I actually think that one of the interesting things of Avatar is basically the question of what happens to your character over the course of this season. Do you find a way to have a middle path? Do you get pushed from the middle to one of the extremes and then find your way back at the end? Or do you basically sacrifice balance? And, the question of which principle is most important to you, maybe you answer it and you say at the end of the day, you don't believe in the traditions of your people anymore. You have moved past tradition. You have moved past the center point of balance, and you have moved all the way towards progress. And you believe now that, that the old ways should be torn down, and that the traditions of your people are shackles that bind you to a past, and that the way forward is to, completely sort of divorce with them. That is awesome as a story arc. Now, you could argue from a certain point of view that you have failed from an Avatar standpoint, right? Avatar's kind of trying to be like, oh, you should be in perfectly balanced. But to be honest with you, that's really only kind of true for the Avatar. But none of your characters, by definition, in Avatar Legends are the Avatar. So this back and forth, this yin-yang of your two conflicting principles, where your balance lies, is really at the heart, in my opinion, of the game, and how you adjust where your playbook and the story is going. And ultimately, the story of your campaign, because let's be clear here, it's PBTA. There's a certain degree of narrative emulation. So it's not a game that's meant to challenge you. So in other words, yeah, you're going to defeat the villain. I mean, like there isn't like a CR balance system, even by the way, for games that do have like a CR balance system. The reason why they have a CR balance system is because that you can roll all your D20 rolls and basically so that the heroes still win in the end.
Voin Uplet tip $25.85. Hey Derek, this is for the second edit. AD&D.
Yes.
Jump out. It's past midnight and my brain is mushy. Smile, can't wait for the dark sun. Stream salty corn, salty corn, salty corn, salty corn.
Voin, thank you so much for that. That is amazing, awesome. Thank you so much. And with that, we're gonna kick off an AD&D second edition campaign series here in the coming weeks. Here, I'm really excited about it. I think it'll be really great. Voin, thank you so much. Get to bed. Catch you on the VOD, and I'd love to hear from you about. I mean, obviously you like Dark Sun, so Dark Sun is 100% going to make the list. So, very excited about that. Thank you, Voin. Thank you, Voin. Thank you, GM Scott, for that support to get that tip goal finished. This stream about to be taken over by this top goal. Listen, there was a point in time where we used to talk about nothing but Pathfinder 2 spells for 8 months in a row. I mean, we could talk about other things as well. Thank you again, Voin. What I was trying to get at is, in most of these RPGs, the question of if you're going to succeed is usually pretty answered. I mean, if you're playing an old school game, the answer is no. In fact, that's what makes old school games, in my opinion, fun, is you don't know if you're going to beat the bad guy at the end. All right, thanks, Voin. We'll see you later. You don't know if you're going to beat, in old school, you don't know if you're going to, there is no guarantee that you're going to beat it. But once you get to a certain modern system, even if it's D20, the balance, the fairness, the system, the math, it's all designed for you kind of to win. So in Avatar, the question shouldn't be, are we going to defeat Ozai? If you were watching Avatar, The Last Airbender, and you honestly were like, oh, what if Aang loses and the Fire Lord destroys everyone and kills everyone and takes over the world? If that was like legitimately like in your brain that you thought that was going to happen, I mean, of course, the show, the people in the show don't know that their success is guaranteed. But as an audience member viewing it, you should pretty much be aware that Aang is going to defeat the Fire Lord. The question was never if he could defeat the Fire Lord. The question was, can Aang defeat the Fire Lord and maintain his balance and figure out basically a way to defeat the Fire Lord without killing him? That was like the whole crux of Aang's entire journey. Would Aang be willing to sacrifice balance for himself if it meant restoring balance to the world? Right? Ozai needed to be taken out, and the only way that seemed possible was to kill him. But that would mean that for Aang, he would have to sacrifice his own balance and sacrifice his own moral compass for the betterment of the world. And as we learned during the course of the final episode, Aang was not willing to do that. And I thought that was pretty cool. So, and that's what made it so compelling, right? That's what made that scene and that moment so amazing. Another classic example of this, right, is Luke in Return of the Jedi, where he is, giving into violence and he's giving into hatred because he's mad that Darth Vader mentioned his sister, and he's going ham on Darth Vader, and he breaks his hand off, and the Emperor's cackling because the Emperor thinks that he won. And in Avatar Legends terms, right? If Avatar Legends was Star Wars Legends and we were all playing kind of Jedi instead of Benders, your two principles would basically be dark side and light side, right? It would be instead of being called the balance, it would be called, I don't know, the Force, or balance in the Force. And the idea would be that, Luke is being pushed towards the dark side because that's what giving into anger and giving into hate does. And in that last moment, he makes the check and he throws away his lightsaber and he gives up on that to seek that, that middle road of balance. And ultimately that's what proves, stronger. So, I mean, you think light side would be tradition? I mean, yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that there's a black and a white here. I was just using people associate the dark side with the color black and the light side with the color white. So didn't that ending require the Deus Ex Machina / intervention of the dragon turtle? Yes, it did. That is correct. Which again, I don't know how to describe it. It from a narrative standpoint, it is not necessarily the most fulfilling thing in the world, honestly, because it is a very Deus Ex Machina intervention. Now, Avatar Legends actually has an ability to actually reflect that really, really highly. But I think the thing that you're missing there, Mike, with the Deus Ex Machina of the dragon turtle spirit bending technique is that because again, they kind of throw it in there at the end, is that very little moment where the idea is it's not about spirit bending. It's about, can your own spirit be unbendable? Right? Because to quote the dragon turtle, to bend another's energy, you must yourself be unbendable. And if you're not, then that dark energy will overwhelm you. And so the moment of tension wasn't necessarily that he could spirit bend or not. It was, is Aang pure enough? Is Aang's own conviction in his belief so unbendable, so strong that he can successfully spirit bend this profoundly immoral man and himself not be corrupted? And I think that is that moment, and then when the energy shines forth from Aang, you think he's about to be consumed, and then it shines out and it runs into Ozai. That is that moment of basically saying, like, yes, Aang is that pure. Aang is that unbendable. He truly believes in what he says. And Aang could only reach that moment by being in balance. So there's something to be said about that. AD&D sounded pretty cool. I think so. Daughter bedtime, looking for the VOD. Take care, Isaiah. Check us out later. Yeah. Well, again, it's not that they threw out that everyone wins Deus Ex. I mean, to be fair, the Avatar state alone is a Deus Ex Machina. But remember, we don't have the Avatar state in this game, so we don't have to worry about it. Yeah, I mean, I think it could have been fine if he had discovered the technique on his own or something like that, or I don't know. There's a lot of ways that you could potentially have done that better, but that is the way that they chose to go. So we have this idea now of our character having this balance, okay? And as part of that, we also have these balance moves. Now, the first time we did this stream, we talked about the basic moves. And basic moves, again, are the building blocks of a PBTA game. They really tell you what the game cares about. But I think balance moves are just as important, if not potentially more important than any of those things. Okay. And in particular, when we're talking about Avatar Legends, and again, we're going to break this down mechanically. Okay. So we might also need the whiteboard. Oh my God. Things are getting out of control. All right. It was a pretty unsatisfying. I don't necessarily know that I disagree. I mean, I do think that I think that there's definitely ways that ending could have gone better. So let's Let's take a look here. Okay, so here is this is the successor playbook, right? And so each, when you are playing this game of Avatar, it's important to note that you have sort of two, what's the word I'm looking for? There's sort of two ways that your balance is tracked. I think a lot of people miss this, okay? The first thing that you have is what's here in the middle, which is called the center, right? You can see it spelled there, C-E-N-T-E-R. I'm actually going to make this even bigger. Okay. And the center is where your character's sort of true belief lies. Okay. And during character creation, it'll usually start at 0, but there are some things that can make it shift up by 1 or down by 1. Okay. And the idea of the center is, on a day-to-day basis, your balance might get pushed around. Okay. But your moral center tends to be much more robust and strong. So my center might be at 0, but you know what? Some things happen that make me go up to +1 progress, and then something takes me to +2 progress. Now that does not mean that during the course of today that my character has suddenly completely forsaken all of his beliefs in balance just because, some things were happening today. Some people were influencing me. While this does matter in the moment, given enough time, given enough, what's the word I'm looking for? Rest and time to reflect, my character will eventually return back to a balance of 0. That's sort of my reload point. That's my reset point. Okay. And so when we talk about characters making meaningful personality shifts, that is talking about moving your character's center. Okay. And that might be something that, again, is a very big and important moment in the course of the game. As a particular note of this, let me actually go over to, let me pull this up. Hold on a sec. Okay, let me see if I can find it. Nope. Unfortunately, I cannot. Here we go. Advancement. Perfect. Here we go. So when your character grows in Avatar, aka when your character basically earns experience points at the end of a session, if you fill up your growth advancement book, and again, remember the way that works is you have this box on your character sheet called growth. Okay. At the end of each session, you'll ask a bunch of questions. And for each question that you answer yes, you will mark a box of growth. And then once all 4 boxes of growth are filled up, which, might happen every 1 to 2 sessions, maybe, depending on what you're doing and how you're playing. When all 4 of your growth boxes are checked, your character takes a growth advancement. And here is what you can choose from. And notice, by the way, that, some of these can only be taken twice. And so one of them is you can get new moves from your playbook. You can take moves from other playbooks. But notice down here that one of them is shifting your center 1 step. So, some of this, like I said, it's mechanical role playing. You, as you're playing the game, might decide my character is moving away from being balanced. My character is moving towards progress. And so you choose to take this advancement. And when you do that, then your center of your character now becomes, right, +1 right here instead of +2. And so the 0 may mean a different thing for each person then, but it is always their own personal center. I think, yes and no. What it means to you is I suppose, depending on the role playing, but what it does mean is that your character is mechanically has no advantage towards tradition or progress. Your character is in the middle. Okay. And this is where we get, again, this is why I wanted to kind of focus on this, is because this is where we get into the balance moves. All right. So when we talk about the balance moves, the first one here, and this one is the most important, it says, when you, and this is the trigger. So remember, in Powered by the Apocalypse, we're having conversations. We're talking, we're doing a thing. And your character, the successor, let's just say for all intents and purposes, let's say that you are, playing Zuko or something like that. When your character takes action in accordance with the value of a principle, and remember, each character will have two principles, one on the left, one on the right. So in our example that we've been using, our traditions our principles are tradition and progress. So when we take an action that is in line with our character's concepts of progress or tradition, we get a choice that we can take. We can mark 1 fatigue, and remember that our characters have 5 fatigue that we can use. It recovers, I would say, fairly easily, but it is a resource that is available to our character. So we can't do this infinitely, but we can spend 1 of our fatigue, and we can roll with the principle instead of whatever stat we would normally roll. Okay, so what does that even mean? Okay, well, the fact of the matter is our character has 4 stats: creativity, focus, harmony, passion. And in the case of, this character, it starts at +1 creativity, +1 focus, -1 harmony, and a 0 in passion. Well, these aren't necessarily some of these stats aren't the greatest, but remember that the basic moves tell us, demand us that in certain cases in this game, the stat that we are rolling is defined by the game. So for example, when we are pleading with an NPC, okay, we're trying to plead an NPC that cares with an NPC who cares what you think for help, support, or action, we roll with harmony. That's the rule of the game. So if my character goes up and is pleading with an NPC to sort of listen to me or help us, then we have to trigger this roll. And that means I have to roll with harmony. But as we discussed, my character's harmony is -1, right? Not great. So there may be a situation here where my character's balance has shifted. Now, again, my character's balance, the center, might be at 0. But let's say throughout the course of this, session, my character has been getting pushed towards his traditionalist roots. And so right now, my balance is currently at +2, -2. All right. This means that when my character triggers that move to plead with the NPC, okay, I normally would be rolling with my harmony stat, which is -1. Not great, right? So I'm rolling 2d6 and I'm subtracting 1. But this balance moves lets us roll with that principle instead of whatever stat we would normally roll with. And that means that if we are acting in accordance with our principle of tradition, we could roll with +2 because that is what our tradition is. We could also roll with progress if we were doing something for progress, but guess what? We would be rolling with a -2. We would actually be worse at this. So what does this mean? Well, it means that if your balance is near the extremes of the game, okay, like if I'm over here at tradition +3, -3, that is a huge mechanical advantage as long as I am trying to do something with my character being in line with the views of tradition. And vice versa, it means that I pretty much will never be able to use this ability for progress because -3 is just terrible. So in this way, mechanically, my character, as long as I can keep, granted, I am limited by my fatigue, but again, fatigue can come back. But if there are skill rolls that come up, as long as my character continues to operate under the guise of tradition, I'm going to kind of be super powered, right? And so there's kind of a dark side approach to this, because when you are at balance, okay, if our character was located right here in the middle, then acting in accordance with our principles would give us a 0. Now, yeah, sure, sometimes that might be better than a -1. So there is that. But by and large, when your character is at the center of the balance, being able to act in accordance with your principle is not actually a benefit to you at all. Whereas if our character is all the way pushed to one extreme, say tradition or progress, as long as our character, that gives us a mechanical incentive to keep acting in accordance with that principle. Because then if we need to make an important roll, we can mark fatigue and I can roll with a big +3 bonus, which is unbelievably monstrously huge in this game. And so, yes, it mechanically incentivizes being off balance. In a weird way, it does, because the idea of this game is that it is tempting. It is especially, again, when they're, in the case of our heroes, there's some threat that is threatening to do something bad that you don't want to have happen. But even from a broader perspective, when you have a goal or an objective, maybe your character is seeking power, or wants revenge against benders, or wants to reunite the Earth Kingdom, or maybe your character wants to, free people from these tyrannical nobilities who have lost touch with the other people. I have just described the villains from Legend of Korra, but these characters are highly principled towards one of their two extremes, and this makes them very powerful. Okay. And so there's a temptation in your character when, you need to save the village and you go, oh man, it would be really helpful right now if I could rely on my traditionalist roots. And you might find that there's an incentive for your character to go that way. Right. And I think that that's really interesting. Oh, hey, we got a tip.
Scott P tipped $15. 2E settings are my jam.
Me too.
Makes me sad that long unwieldy adventures replaced setting splat books.
Yeah. I have really disliked what they have done with the splat books in 5e. The Spelljammer book, I bought the Dragonlance book, believe it or not, because I love Dragonlance so much. And it was just such a disappointment. I mean, there is something, for those of you who are relatively new to the hobby, you will never understand the sheer joy of getting a campaign box set. That was like, for me, it's still probably to this day, if I ever became some big designer or whatever, and I had the ability, I would love to do a Kickstarter just so that I could do a box set, because I think getting a box set, and I don't just mean and when I say box set, I don't necessarily mean your books are in a box. Okay. Like Old School Essentials did that. I mean a box set. I mean, you've got the soft cover books, you've got the maps, you've got tokens, punch outs, like a true box set experience. That is so cool for me, and I love it. Thank you, Scott. Pepper says, but what if you go further than +3 on the balance track? Pepper, that's a great question. Thank you for setting that up. So what we've seen here is that when your character is pushed to one extreme or the other, it kind of gives you a buff in a way, as long as you act in accordance with that principle. Okay. So what happens though? Now I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but because Pepper asked, we'll kind of go to this. What happens if our balance shifts past the end of the track? Then what happens, Pepper, is we lose our balance. We obsess over that principle to a degree that's not healthy for you or for anyone around you. And we essentially kind of die. I mean, we don't die, but because you can't really die in this game. But like in terms of RPG, we lose. So what happens? We have to give in or submit to our opposition. Okay. We lose control of yourself in a harmful or destructive way. We take an extreme action in line with that principle, and then we flee. Afterwards, when you've had some time to recover and recenter yourself, this is important, shift our center one step towards the principle that we exceeded. And then we clear all of our negative conditions, we clear all of our fatigue, and our balance gets reset back to this new center. So that basically means that there's kind of an element here where if your balance goes past the end of the track, you kind of lose control of your character a little bit, because your character has become obsessed with that principle to perhaps an unhealthy degree. Okay. And so as an example of this, again, let's imagine we were playing again, this is not the book, right? So, Zuko, someone's playing our Zuko playbook. Now, Zuko has managed to move his center to -1, okay? Maybe at the beginning of the campaign, his center was actually like at -2 or -3. But by taking growth, okay, right, working with, Iroh or whatever, his uncle, Zuko's player character has been taking advancements to move his center towards the center. And so while the character started at -3 center, they have taken 2 advancements, and now their character is at -1 center. Okay, so, the person playing Zuko is seeing this kind of redemption arc, and my character is learning that the ways of his people maybe aren't the best, and that it's better to seek a new way, a middle way, or maybe even shift all the way towards progress. Okay, but this is where we differ from the TV show. What if we're playing in our game, and what has happened is that Zuko's character has suddenly, been forced to fight his sister, and maybe he doesn't hate his sister, or maybe May, kind of holds it over his head, or that he's betrayed her and his people. And what if Iroh wasn't there to kind of guide Zuko? Maybe after Zuko has joined with Team Avatar, enough things are happening in the narrative of our game that Zuko has been pushed his center to right here. So now Zuko is really struggling because he's very much, he's doing things very much in line with the Fire Nation tradition. But then something happens, right? Maybe Azula shows up, and Azula attempts to shift Zuko's balance by reminding him of his duty and that he is going to be the Fire Lord someday, and he needs to start acting like it, and blah, 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 right? Really calling on him to say that this isn't just about you, it's about your people, and you've abandoned them, right? And you've turned against them. Well, this cuts right to our character's soul. What happens if our character is unable to resist that shift of balance? Well, in that case, Zuko would move off the track, okay? And if that happened, we kind of lose control of Zuko for a moment. And what would happen is our character would give in or submit to the opposition, lose control of themselves in a harmful way, or take extreme action. So what does that mean? Well, in the context of our game, maybe it means that Zuko turns against the Avatar. Maybe it means that Zuko agrees to go with Azula and won't train the Avatar in firebending. Maybe it means that Zuko betrays the Avatar and tells the Fire Nation where he's currently recovering or where he's hidden. Maybe it means Zuko takes Katara prisoner to hold her hostage against the Avatar, right? The character has sort of lost control of that. And in that moment, so Zuko, in a moment of being pushed past his extreme, turns in the Avatar and gives the Avatar to Azula. And Azula takes the Avatar away, and says, thanks, Zuzu, or something like that. And Zuko, okay, when all said and done, this is going to shift our center from -1 now to -2. So in a way, right, Zuko has undone some of the quote unquote progress that he was making. And then his balance resets to right here. But Zuko has moved one step closer towards, moving in towards this idea of no longer being balanced and sort of embracing tradition entirely. And as a result, the story of our character isn't over, right? It's not like, oh, you gave in once and that's the end of it. No, because Avatar is always about characters who lose themselves and find their way back again, and then lose themselves and find their way back again. Now, all that being said, I should note that if, let me find it real quick here. One of the ways that you might make a new character in the campaign is by retiring your character. And one of the reasons that you might do that is because if your center shifts off the edge of the map, okay? So what ends up happening here is, let me kind of put this out on the sheet here. I'll go down here. Okay. When you lose your balance shifts off the edge of the track. And then your center, which we just showed, shifts towards that principal well. But what happens if our center were to shift off the edge of the track? What if Zuko, okay, did that again? And now our center is located right here. Okay. And then what happens if it happened again? Well, we've run out of spaces. And what this means from the game's perspective is that the question that Zuko was trying to figure out an answer to has been answered. Okay. If the center shifts, not the balance, if the center shifts off the edge, then these moments indicate that the inner conflict within your character about the two principles is over. They've made their choice in favor of the principle that their center has shifted towards. In other words, remember I said the whole point of a character in Avatar is, can your character, or what will happen to your character as you try and struggle against the world and the challenges and the people around you? And the question being asked is, can you find balance? And if your center moves off the edge, then the answer is no. You could not find balance. And in a sense, your character now either retires, maybe becomes an NPC, or at least fundamentally changes. You have answered the question of the successor playbook. And you would basically either need to retire your character, or in some cases, rebuild them in a way with a new playbook that now asks more questions that are relevant to your character. But on the question of, is our character going to be able to figure out a way to manage between the tradition of the Fire Nation and the progress of a new world? The answer has been no. Our character has, in this instance, Zuko has given in and has basically said, I am siding with the traditions of the Fire Nation people. And I'm going to be the right hand of my father, the Phoenix King, and I will be the Fire Lord, and I will help him in bringing, law and order to this chaotic world, believing in the traditions of his people. And so that can happen to a PC. Now, we never really saw that happen on the show because, it's a TV show and it's got to be made for that. But that's the kind of really mature storytelling that can occur inside Avatar. So going back to that, we mentioned the balance moves. So again, when we have that sort of extreme balance, we can use it to live up to that principle. And the game mechanically rewards us by being able to roll with a very significant number, and regardless of what our stat is. But we saw that if we're near the edge of the track, we could potentially lose our balance. And then that sort of makes us lose control of our character. So how might we lose our balance? Well, there's a couple of things. One is, again, these are all the balance moves. One thing that can happen is, this is a PC facing move. So actually, let me say this. We'll go to deny a call out. When you, the player, deny an NPC calling upon you to live up to your principle, roll with that principle. Okay. So what does that mean? It means when Azula shows up, Compy says, there is a kind of moment like that where Zuko teams up with Azula and the Earth Kingdom Dai Li agents against the Avatar and Iroh. Compy, that is it's exactly the scene that I was thinking of, right? And Zuko in that instance sort of, got pushed over the edge. So if Azula shows up and is basically calling Zuko out about his traditions, she is trying to get him to shift his balance. She's trying to influence his worldview. She's trying to influence the way that he is thinking about the world. And so when that happens, he has to roll with that principle. Now, this is very interesting because this move here is backwards. Okay? It's backwards because what happens here is normally when you roll high, right, on a bonus in PBTA, you get what you want, right? You get the success. It's when you roll a 6 or lower that you miss and bad things happen to you. But this move, deny a call out, is reverse. Because remember, we're going to roll with our principal. So what does that mean? It means that if our principal, let's just say our center is 0, but right now we're sitting right here. We're sitting at +2 tradition, -2 progress, okay? So this is currently where we're at. So if somebody were to call upon us to live up to the principles of tradition, we would roll 2d6 +2. But if somebody tried to call upon us to live up to the principles of progress, we would roll with 2d6 -2. So once we start down that path of balance, of shifting away from balance, it becomes easier to manipulate us because we're going to roll 2d6 and we are going to add or subtract our principal. So the closer we are to a principal, the higher our 2d6 plus modifier total will be. And as you can see here, on a hit, which means a 7 or higher, we have to do what they say, or we have to mark a fatigue. Either way, it's going to cost us something. We either have to do what their character is telling us to do, or we have to use one of our 5 fatigue. And by the way, if we don't have any fatigue if all of our fatigue are filled up, then we have to do what they say. And by the way, if we are all the way over at +3 tradition or +2 tradition, we might easily roll a 10 or higher, in which case those words hit particularly hard. And not only must we mark a fatigue or do exactly what they say, but we also have to shift our balance towards the principle. Right? So they are moving us and pushing us in a way that maybe we don't want. Because remember, as a player, we've decided that we are going to deny what this NPC is calling upon us to do. The GM is basically trying to manipulate your character. And again, this is why I call this mechanical role-playing. In a lot of other role-playing games, your classic D20 games, you, the player, would just decide, does my character agree with Azula or not? And you might go, no, Zuko's on this really cool redemption arc. He goes, you're wrong, Azula. These people are worth saving. And the Avatar is going to save the world, not Dad, And it's like, oh, yeah, cool. And that's fun. I mean, that's part of role-playing games for some people. But we play PBTA games to find out what's going to happen, right? The whole point of PBTA games is nobody knows what's going to happen about your character or the world, including you. You don't know what's necessarily going to happen with your character. And so what this allows you to do is it allows you to potentially act in a way that is surprising to you. And so what ends up happening is if you're really now, by the way, I should note similarly, if somebody called on us in this situation towards our principle of progress, we would be subtracting 2 or subtracting 3. All right. We are much, much more likely to not be swayed by that. It's very hard to push us all the way to the other side of our track. And what ends up happening is if this misses, which normally would be bad, in this case, it's good. It means that we stand strong. We can clear a condition, clear a fatigue, or shift our balance, our choice. In other words, if we roll low enough, because maybe our principle, maybe we're at balance and we only have a 0, in which case it's harder to do this against us. But if that happens, we are like renewed because we stuck to our principles and we believe what we're doing. So maybe Azula calls on Zuko to follow the tenets of the Fire Nation. Zuko tries to deny Azula. Now he's been getting pushed towards his tradition. So now we're at +2 for our, I gotta find my mouse cursor. Here it is. We're at +2 on our balance track, which means that we're going to be rolling with +2. So it's not very likely that we're going to get a 6-, which is a miss. But let's say, we roll a 4. And so the total is 6. In that case, we stand strong. And in fact, we can the game gives us a little bit of a bonus. And we can clear a fatigue. We have that renewed sense of purpose. So denying a call out. The GM is going to be trying to manipulate your character, and not just NPCs, by the way, because PCs, that's right, other PCs can also try to manipulate your character, okay? Because what can happen is another PC can use call someone out, and they can do this on anyone. They can do this on an NPC, but they could also do this on another PC. So whenever you as a PC openly call on someone to live up to their principle, okay, you have to shift your balance away from center, because you're trying to push somebody away from center. And so when you're trying to push someone off balance, it's almost like a physics, right, reaction, right? Equal and opposite force. If you're trying to push someone off of balance by calling upon them to live up to a principle, it necessarily shifts you off balance, okay? And note, it says you have to shift your balance away from center. So you have to move your balance further away from wherever your center point is, because in order to push someone else off balance, you become off balance, okay? Yeah, very Star Wars light-sidey, dark-sidey, Mike T. Yes, I don't know if you were here earlier, but I was saying in a Star Wars game, instead of tradition and progress, these might be light side and dark side. So when that happens, you shift your balance from center, then name and roll with their principle. So the same idea is, if they're already highly pushed towards that principle, if their tradition is at +2, then when I call upon them to live up to their tradition, I'm going to add +2 to my roll. On a hit, they are called to act as you say. They must either do it or mark a condition. On a 7 to 9, they challenge your view of the world and mark 1 fatigue, or they shift your balance as they choose. And on a miss, they can demand that you act in accordance with one of your principles. You either mark a condition or act as they request. So this is all about turning that scene, which is very common in Avatar, of two characters trying to, I don't want to say manipulate each other, right? But a big part of Avatar is the idea that people who are not in balance are easier to use. They're easier to manipulate. It's easier to get what you want by being off balance and by making other people off balance. And so when you meet someone who's an extremist, it can be very easy to manipulate them, because all you have to do is call on them to live up to their principle. And if they're +2 or +3, you are probably going to hit, in which case they either have to do what you say or mark a condition, which is basically kind of like taking damage. And so, yeah, like that's a tough situation to be in. And again, the NPC or the PC might decide to go with it because they don't want to mark a condition, or because it's appropriate to do so. And even if they say, no, I don't want to do what you're doing, it's in a normal D&D game, I would say, they say, you're not acting like a knight. You should return to the king and beg forgiveness. And the player would go, nah, I'm not going to do that. I know, I'm a chivalrous oath, but the king's kind of a dick. And I think, I just don't feel like my character would do that. And that's totally fine. That's the way a lot of people play role-playing games. But in this game, I wouldn't get to just make that decision. There would be a die roll involved, and we'd find out what happens. And by the way, what might happen is my character, quote unquote, fails that roll. And as a result, I have two choices now as a player. I either have to go back to the king and beg forgiveness, or I have to mark a condition. And so then, let's say, as a player, I still don't want to go back to the king because, it's not like it's literal mind control. But the game says, okay, you can do that, but you have to pay the price. You have to mark a condition. And now this is a really interesting moment, because my character feels like, because remember, the roll was successful, my character feels like they should return to the king because the roll was successful. My character does feel like he should return to the king and beg forgiveness, but I don't do it. And as a result, I have to mark a condition. And which condition I mark not only has a mechanical effect, and you might be car opping this and doing this min-max, but it also tells us a lot about your character and how they feel right now. Maybe the king, maybe they feel guilty for having abandoned their king and their people. Maybe you feel afraid of the punishment and the shame and the scorn that you might receive when you return home. Maybe you're angry. You're angry that the king has betrayed the principles of the kingdom. You're angry that you have been forced into exile, right? You're troubled. Your character is basically depressed. You're down. You feel horrible about it. So which conditions that you choose as a player mechanically, it's like, it's like becoming stunned or paralyzed or immobilized or frightened too or something. It's a condition, but this has a role-playing connection. And what you choose to answer here tells us a lot about your character, and it tells us a lot about how you see your character. And in fact, one thing that I often encourage in PBTA games is for all the players to have a conversation about why someone chose something, not in character, out of character. I want to, if I was playing with KC here and he said, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I think my character actually feels really bad about this. I think they feel really guilty. And I, as the GM, or maybe another player says, well, like, what do you feel guilty about? Like, do you feel guilty because like you're betraying your oath? And then like KC thinks about it and he says, no, like, I think I feel guilty because I'm letting down, my fellow knights. I'm letting down my people, maybe my family feels like I've betrayed the kingdom and I just feel so guilty about that. And it's like, yeah, like that. It's not really about my oath of loyalty to the nation. It's about the people. It's about the people I left behind. And like, as you're talking, you kind of go, you know what? Actually, I don't think I feel guilty so much as I feel insecure about my choices. And now I'm wondering if I made the right choice. And so like by having this conversation with each other at the table, everyone at the table is learning about your character, and the GM is learning about your character. And most importantly, you are learning about your character. We're all finding it out together. We're playing to find out. So balance moves are tremendously important in this context. Now, again, so as a PC, you can call someone out on to live up to their principle. You can call out NPCs. You can call out your fellow PCs. But whenever you try to push someone towards a principle, you risk your own balance. Similarly, if an NPC tries to call you out, because remember, the GM doesn't roll dice in Powered by the Apocalypse games. That's why they need two different moves. One is when the PC is doing the roll, and the other one is when an NPC is doing the roll to you. That is why there's two different moves, which is why they have to take this deny a call out and reverse it, which is kind of, I think, really interesting. Lastly, there's also this idea of NPCs shifting your balance. Now, this is very subtle, but it's different than denying a call out. When an NPC calls you out, they are basically saying, like, you have these two principles and you need to pick one and you need to choose one. And I am, it's kind of like Old West style. I'm calling you out. I'm saying you are, not doing a good job at being, what you swore to do. You have dropped the ball. I'm calling you out. I'm saying you are doing a shitty job of this. Okay. But NPCs don't necessarily have to call you out. Okay. In order to change your balance. NPCs can also try to shift your balance. And this is much more conversational, okay? This is much more, we're Lord Zuko, right? Okay, we're Lord Zuko. And at the beginning, maybe the campaign has progressed a little bit. And our character is now, hold on a sec here. Okay, our character, their center started here, but now we have shifted the center to here. Okay, our character has started to see things. Things have been happening to us, and then we still believe predominantly in our Fire Nation principles, but then we go into an Earth Kingdom village, and we meet, a young girl whose parents and family were killed by the Fire Nation. Now, she's not trying to manipulate us. She might not even know who we are. So she's not trying to call us out on our principles, right? But through that conversation, okay? And by the way, when I say conversation, I mean literal conversation. I mean you and me talking, role-playing. Maybe we're saying things in the third person. I might say, the young woman sobbingly tells you of how her village is on the brink of starvation, that her family was killed or taken away by the Fire Nation, right? We're just talking. And then, that's rough, buddy. I don't know, that's what you respond back with. But the GM might say, the words that she is saying are shifting your balance maybe a little bit. Now, as a PC, you can choose to resist this shift towards your balance. But if you choose to do so, again, your balance might shift. But resisting your shifting of your balance is much more internal. Okay? This is where you as a player and the GM, you have to be very open and honest, with each other. And basically decide, is this conversation having this effect? Did U.S. daylight savings time screw me? Beowulf, it sure did. We have been going for an hour, buddy. Yeah, it's a very neat and fictional way of dealing with the PvP. In fact, I would argue that Avatar Legends has a lot of PvP. And if you watch the show, especially, actually both of them, both Avatar The Last Airbender and Avatar Legend of Korra, there's a lot of PvP. It's just not PvP the way that you think about it, right? It's PvP, emotional PvP. It's growth PvP. It's figuring out. It's this social PvP. So let's use an example of this. I apologize if you don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of Avatar, but generally speaking, I got to find them real quick. I think it's the Prodigy. Let me find it real quick. Guardian. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So in the Avatar game, generally, most people assume that this playbook here is quote unquote the Toph playbook. And this is the Prodigy. And the Prodigy is, as the name suggests, you're very highly socially, highly super skilled. But we can see that the question that is being asked of the Prodigy is excellence versus community, right? So what does that mean? Well, if we think about Toph, when the show starts, Toph's center is like somewhere over here, right? And she works alone, and she's always taking care of herself, and she's the best, and no one can tell her otherwise. And you dunderheads better listen. And if you look at a lot of the first half of the episodes with Toph, a lot of it is the other characters, Aang, Katara, even Sokka, influencing Toph and trying to get her to understand, right, the strength and value of trusting people, of finding a community, of finding the strength in other people. Okay? And in that way, her friends are trying to move her towards her center, right? Awesome, quick and dirty. Well, hopefully, if you have anything, hit me up on the Patreon, buddy. Thanks for stopping by. So, her fellow party members, they want her to be more, selfishly maybe, but also like the idea is that like being at balance is good, and they can see that Toph is off balance, and she needs to learn that being part of a community can be a strength as well. And by shifting her to the right, they can move her towards balance. Now, again, not everything has, like a TV show, it's kind of a kid's TV show. Not everything always has to be so altruistic, I'm not saying that like people literally have to be like against one another, but your character might be like, no, I kind of want to push this character away from balance, because I think that the way that my character views the situation, like I want to use this character to help me, get revenge. And, I want to push her towards excellence. I want her to be more obsessed with being the best than trying to find, community. And that way I can manipulate your PC more easily. And so there's like a meta game to fucking with each other. But that is the story that emerges. And I should note that Avatar Legends, the PBTA game, is very capable of creating what I would call some rather mature storytelling. Now, I'm not saying you would go the route of like a Monster Hearts style game, but, let's call it what it is. Legend of Korra and Avatar Last Airbender were kids' TV shows on Nickelodeon, made for kids. You could have much more mature themes and much more potentially not as black and white goals, right? And you might have a character who is really angry and does want revenge and does, you know what I mean? And is okay with, maybe manipulating people around him or her to get what they want. So what ends up happening then is we've got these balance moves, and they can be so when our character's balance is shifted around the track, it can be a source of strength for us, but it can also be a great source of weakness, because it can allow other people the ability to manipulate our character. And potentially it can even take our character off the edge of the track. And when that happens, we lose control of our character for a little bit and potentially do or say something that we don't want to have happen. And that's why we play to find out. And so when your character is in balance, it's very hard to manipulate your character. But you also lose some of that ability to call upon the strength that comes from being from being obsessed with a certain principle. Now, I've just spoken for the last 80 minutes just about these 5 moves. And it should be very clear that, the game, a lot of what occurs at a game is not about, how sick you can bend and what kind of cool martial arts moves you can have. It's about figuring out what your character's story is going to be. But instead of just deciding it, which is what happens in most games, you just pick, this is how my character is going to change. They're going to start off really selfish and insecure. And then as we level up, I'm probably going to become more aware of the party. And then my character is going to basically fall in love with somebody. And then I love everybody and the party's great. You don't get to do that in this game. We get to find out together what will be the arc of your character. And you get to make choices all along the road. But the dice are going to be involved, and you're going to be forced to make maybe sometimes difficult decisions. And sometimes you might even be in a moment where you go, this is never what I would have picked for my character, but it feels right. And I'm going to go with it. And everyone's like, awesome. Like, that's cool. Like we're seeing something, visceral and feral be created right before our very eyes. And even again, what gets measured gets managed. what gets rewarded gets repeated. Look at the end of each session. Each player answers the following questions. Did we learn something challenging, exciting, or complicating about the world? Great. So the game is rewarding us for paying attention, asking questions, and exploring, basically, the world. Did we stop a dangerous threat or solve a community problem? Again, we said the core element of Avatar is that there are challenges, great challenges, that these, very talented, very special young people are going to be called upon to make. And so the game rewards you for that. But the last one is, did you guide a companion towards balance, or did you end the session at your center? So this is, again, where the game is saying, we want to reward players for seeking balance. So whether it's finding your own balance and ending the session at your center, or trying to push other characters towards balance. That is encouraged in this game via this growth question. Basically, it's one of the 3 ways that you can get an experience point. There's also a 4th way you can get it, which is from your character's playbook. Each playbook or class has its own XP growth question. And so this should tell us that, again, we're not playing the bad guys. We're not playing Kuvira. And even though we were talking about Zuko, he does go on that massive redemption arc. But we're not playing Kuvira. We're not playing Amon, right? We are playing the good guys. And the good guys seek balance, right? Avatar is not necessarily a world of good and evil so much. Although, again, I said that some of my least favorite villains are the ones that kind of fall into that sort of very easy, clearly defined lines of good and bad. But instead, these are characters who are out of balance. And so I think that these moves are incredibly important, and these are unique to the Avatar game. And I think that they are the hub, the access around which the entire game sort of rotates. All right, so we're going to keep going because I do want to touch at least a little bit about combat exchanges and why they are really good. And a lot of people don't understand this, and so I do want to talk about them. You may not like them, and that's okay. And we'll talk about PBTA combat in general, and I'll tell you what the problem is, and I'll tell you why this system solves it. But before we go on, does anybody have any questions about balance or the balance moves or this concept within Avatar of using the balance track or anything like that? Well, no, but Francois is coming in. I started watching your archetype ranking videos last night. I'm now at S tier. Awesome. Oh, not the classes. All archetypes ranked. Yeah, that's a long series, Francois. This Sunday stream is a nice change of pace. Yes, there's no doubt. The archetype ranking stream, along with the spell ranking stream, are very, very, very crunchy, right? A lot of numbers, a lot of data. So this is much more of an open thing. But that was a really great stream. And actually, Francois, once Player Core 2 comes out later this year, we're probably not going to go back and re-rank all the archetypes, but we are going to go back and re-rank all the classes at the very least, just to look at, and maybe even the multi-class archetypes from the core classes, just to see if they've changed at all. So thank you for your very first super chat. I'm going to give you a strong on that one. Cheers. Thank you, Francois. Akemo says Kuvira would have solved the community problem of her regime not being the greatest nation of all, if not for that pesky avatar. Yeah, and so as an again, NPCs tend to be more simple in Avatar. Let me see if they have an NPC that I can quickly look up. Yeah, here we go. PDF. There we go. So when you have an NPC, okay, the NPC just has one principle. Okay. What makes the PC special is that they have multiple principles. They have two. PCs are about being between the two of them. NPCs just get a single principle. And if you're a minor NPC, your principal track is 0 to +1. You also only have 3 boxes of fatigue, and you can only take a single condition, AKA you're pretty easy to take out. You're pretty easy to deal with, and you're a minor NPC. Even if your principle is like domination, or bender equality or whatever, or I guess I would say equalist quality. You're not that principled because you're just a minor NPC. But when you become a major NPC, you get a little bit more fatigue, and now your principal track goes from 0 to +1 to +2. So NPCs, rather than being focused around the tug of war between two principles, NPCs are basically the principal versus not the principal, basically. So it makes them a little bit easier to run. And NPCs tend to be a little bit, they're NPCs. They tend to be a little bit more one-dimensional because they are just there to serve as a foil, as a mirror for the PCs. The PCs are the ones who have to deal with it. And lastly, they do have legendary NPCs. Like if you were to meet, Toph or Lord Zuko, they have 15 fatigue, which is way more than a PC has. They can take up to 8 conditions. Remember, our PCs can only take 5. And their principal track goes past +3 all the way to +4. So legendary NPCs are like super legit. But obviously, hopefully you're not going and fighting Toph or something like that, or trying to, but you might go there and try to convince Toph to help, and so there's a reasonable world where you might do this. So I think that is something important to note. So yes, so Kuvira, obviously I would say, it's debatable. She's probably not a legendary NPC, but Kuvira is probably a major NPC. Oh, no, she would be a master NPC. Look at this. Here's our master. Yeah, so there we go. Kuvira would be a master NPC. So she's kind of like a PC, but you can see that their game is sort of made up. Remember, PCs only get 5 fatigue boxes, but there's 3 or 4 or 5 fatigues. There are 3 or 4 or 5 PCs, each with 5 fatigue boxes. So this master NPC, if this was Kuvira, her principle might be, tradition, maybe. Her principle might be control, right? Her principle might be whatever. Ironically, her, we could figure out what Kuvira's principle was, but she has 10 boxes of fatigue. So she's a little bit better designed to be able to, go up against an entire group of people. Pepper says, it is a shame that some of the playbooks don't make direct use of the balance track. The ones that do are better for it. Pepper, I completely agree with you, but I also understand that sometimes, there's some playbooks I think that are inherently more about the balance track, but I do agree with you. KC says, controlling your emotions in a stressful situation is impossible. We convince ourselves we can, but it's a convenient lie. Characters should be the same. You don't have 100% control of their emotions. And I tend to agree with KC here. Actually, I agree a whole lot. And, this is why in Knights of Last Call Patreon land, which, again, most of you are members, but if you're not a member and you're watching this and you want to have this kind of level of conversation about off-the-wall niche games like Avatar, I call games like Avatar Legends true role-playing game. Now, some people have an umbrage with that because it implies that the other RPGs that are false role-playing games. But the reason why I call it a role-playing game, a true role-playing game, is because this is a game about role-playing, right? D&D, Pathfinder 2, that's just a game. Think about it. You could role-play or not role-play. It wouldn't make a difference. You could choose to and have a lot of fun with it, but the motivations of your character don't change anything in the game itself. So this game, Avatar Legends, is a game that is about role-playing, not a game that just has role-playing or with role-playing, right? If the game is the cupcake, the role-playing is the frosting in D&D and Pathfinder 2nd Edition. But this game, the game and the role-playing, it's all mixed together. It's all just one homogenous bunch. You can't separate the two. PBTA games are like that in general, but this game is especially like that. Aang goading Admiral Zhao into setting his own ship on fire by making him angry is a good example of an NPC losing balance and getting taken out. Absolutely. In fact, we probably won't have time to do this tonight, But one of the things I'd love to do, maybe we'll just do it as a Patreon thing, is pull up scenes from Avatar, from like YouTube and watch them. And then like when somebody does something, pause it and go, okay, did you see the move? Did you see the move? Okay, push play. Okay, something resolved. Okay, push play. What just happened there? Like converting it into Avatar speak. And you'll actually find, I have done this. Aaron and I have done this. It is crazy how good the fidelity is very, very high. And you know what? This is another excellent point to make. Avatar does have an assumption that these characters are, in Avatar, they're not adults. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's tough for them. They're still young kids most of the time. The character sheet looks like a check. Sign it over to me. This kind of reminds me why Korra's finale didn't really feel very memorable. Kuvira was defeated via cool fight scene. She wasn't out-principled by the heroes. And there's some truth to that. I mean, ultimately, what Kuvira, though, understands is that she, I think that Korra, she can't beat Korra. That, like, no matter how strong she thinks she is, the Avatar is stronger. But I agree with you. I actually like Kuvira as a villain a lot. I actually like season 4 of Legend of Korra a lot. But I do agree with you that the final confrontation with her is not very good. I mean, for my money, the single best villain resolution scene is definitely Zahir. That is really, really great. But it should be noted that Zahir didn't lose the battle for his soul. Zahir very much still believed in the principle that he espoused. He just got captured and imprisoned. The idea is that Kuvira sort of realized the error of her mistake. So like that's supposed to be the win with Kuvira. All right. I want to finish up by talking a little bit about combat exchanges and why some people don't like them and why I think that not liking them is fine, but I do think it is a mistake to not like them. Okay. All right. So here is what a combat exchange is. Okay. We're going to go through this. Avatar Legends, to my knowledge, is the very first PBTA game to kind of create a mechanical interface for combat. Traditionally, going all the way back to Apocalypse World, but also in Monster Hearts and Dungeon World and all those other games, combat wasn't a phase. All you did in those games was have a conversation. And we would just be talking. And the conversation might be that you're walking down the street and that there's a parade going by. But the conversation could also be that the door just got kicked in by a giant orc and he's charging you with a battle axe. But nothing changes. There's no change in the mechanics. Everything still works with, 2d6 plus a stat. Maybe it triggers a move. We still have conversation. I say, oh, the orc kicks down the door and charges you. What do you do? And the player says, I rush to meet him with my axe. And I go, awesome. You guys clash together. Sounds like we're hack and slashing because that move just triggered because of the fiction that we were just talking about. Roll 2d6 plus your strength. The character goes, oh, I got a 9. And I go, great. You guys clash together, do your damage to him. He's going to do his damage to you as you guys start wailing into each other. Armor is bending, shields are splintering, axes are sparking. It's a rolling melee. All right, what are the rest of you doing? Okay, that was a 7, 8, or 9. And we're just having a conversation in Dungeon World. And the moves trigger. But there's a problem, okay? And there's a big problem. The problem is that and this is actually specifically a problem in Dungeon World. And I have run Dungeon World more than any other PBTA game that I have played. I played a lot of Monster Hearts. I've played only a handful of games of Apocalypse World, but I played a lot of Dungeon World. I've run a lot of Dungeon World. And the problem is, in a game like Dungeon World, in a game like Monster Hearts, okay, where you guys are teenagers at high school, it is not very often that, all 4 characters or 5 characters at the table are going to be trying to, fight the villain. Okay, or fight at the same time. In fact, oftentimes when you play Monster Hearts, if somebody goes aggro and does something violent, it's usually like a one and done type moment, right? It's one PC, who is slamming, maybe they're playing a dick bag jock and they're slamming the nerdy PC into a locker, right? Boom, you make the roll, one and done. It's not a combat. It's not like D&D where everybody's like, hey, like I've got a sword and I've got an axe and I've got shields and I've got magical spells. We all kind of want to participate here. Orcs or goblins are swarming into Moria's into the Tomb of Balin in Moria. If that was a PBTA game, and you're playing Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli and Boromir, everybody would want to do their thing. And so as a GM, obviously you want to be able to give everybody a cool moment. And, there's techniques, and we've talked about them on this stream before. But the fact of the matter is, I think all PBTA games start to break down really, really quickly once you start making a lot of dice rolls. And the reason for that is because when you get more people rolling dice, like let's say Gimli goes to hack and slash, and Aragorn goes to hack and slash, and Legolas goes to fire a volley, right? And Boromir goes to defend. So everybody's going, we would never say that, of course. We never speak our move. They're just using the fiction. Boromir describes how he gets in front of the hobbits with his shield raised. And I said, oh, great. Sounds like you're defending. Roll with plus con. Okay, if Boromir rolls high, great. Hold 3, hold 1, and we can deal with that. The problem is when you start rolling a lot of dice in Powered by the Apocalypse, people are going to start rolling 6 minuses. Okay? And when you roll a 6 minus, then it is a GM move. And as a result of the GM move, the GM, number one, is put on the spot. They have to come up with something in the fiction. They have to make a move, a soft move, a hard move, decide what the move is going to be. But when you make hard moves and soft moves, the situation tends to spiral a little bit, which is fine. That's the intention of them. But when you're making a lot of 6 minus moves, when you're making a lot of GM moves in very short succession, it can quickly spiral out of control. And instead of feeling like a really cool moment, it can start to feel like, just by playing the game, you are making it impossible for you to defeat, to win or to do well. And it can set up a situation where the GM feels very compelled to start, making really, really super soft moves, and just, or in some cases, becoming overwhelmed entirely. And it slows the game down. It slows the combat down. People in combat, they want a certain pace of play. And so if in that round of combat, right, like Boromir goes to defend, Aragorn goes to hack and slash, Gimli goes to hack and slash, Legolas goes to fire a volley, and let's say like 2 or 3 of them rolled a 6 minus. Now I have to come up with 3 moves that'll potentially create a more of a complex story. And doing that once isn't a bad thing, but when you have to do that 2 times or 3 times, it can really, really spiral out of control. I mean, the best example of this all time is like, classic D&D thing, the evil wizard or maybe the fire dragon breathes fire on the entire party. Now in D&D, this is really simple. Everybody rolls a saving throw and you kind of deal with it individually. But the way that you would represent that in a PBTA game is you would have everybody defy danger, assuming we were playing Dungeon World. Well, that's great, except when a bunch of players start rolling 6 minuses, you suddenly have to create a bunch of moves. And you could be, you could just say, oh, you take a bunch of damage, you take a bunch of damage, you take a bunch of damage. But I don't know that is fulfilling your obligation of making the game interesting and making failing forward and creating more interesting situations. And so it just puts a lot of mental bandwidth on the GM to be able to handle what I would call a traditional fighting game. Now, again, in Apocalypse World, this didn't matter. In Monster Hearts, it didn't matter because fighting almost never happened. And when it did, it was never like a party versus a group of enemies type situation. But it does come up a lot in Dungeon World. And while I think I have gotten pretty good at it, it is not easy, and it still sometimes kind of gets out of control. Well, in Avatar, the fact of the matter is your characters are martial arts bending badasses. I mean, that is just part of the lore of the game. And the truth of the matter is that every character, whether they are an airbender or an earthbender or a waterbender or, someone who's good with technology, everybody is capable of holding their own in a fight. And we've seen this for every single character on Team Avatar in both series. And that means that when a fight starts, everybody's going to want to do their thing. So now we're back to the classic PBTA problem. How do we handle this? And I think Avatar Legends has created a system which finally allows you to use PBTA mechanics, but actually not spiral out of control. And here's the way it works, okay? In order to keep some semblance of order, each player simultaneously, okay, is going to make a stance move. All right? And you have to choose your stance. Now, remember, combat. The one thing I should note here, combat exchanges are not fights in the D&D sense where you're going to go like, oh, we're going to go 3 or 4 or 5 rounds till everybody's dead. A combat exchange in D&D terms is 1 round of combat. Because in Avatar, we see this all the time. The characters come together. There's air bending, water bending, fire bending, everybody. And then like there's that moment, right, where everyone's kind of looking around, judging each other. There might be some dialogue back and forth, right? People are having this like conversation mid-fight. In Avatar, we typically go from sort of conversation and talking about our feelings and talking about balance. And then there's a combat exchange and there's some really cool martial arts moves. And then we go back into more talking or, moving around or exploring the scene. And then there's maybe the, Azula says, well, then die. And then she attacks again. And then we go into another combat exchange. But the combat exchange is sort of separated by what I would call normal PBTA. You're not going to just go combat exchange round 1, combat exchange round 2, combat exchange round 3. So when a combat exchange occurs, each player simultaneously, which makes this really fast, chooses, are they going to defend and maneuver? Are they going to advance and attack? Or are they going to evade and observe? And it's basically just a very basic kind of description of what you're kind of doing for, if this was a scene in the cartoon show, right? Quickly cutting between the characters. What is your character doing in this scene, right? Are they, surrounding themselves with a water, Katara goes, I'm going to, draw forth the water from the nearby well, and I'm going to form it around me as sort of a swirling nexus of water. Okay, so she's defending and maneuvering, she's readying. So everybody chooses defend and maneuver, advance and attack, and evade and observe. And then again, simultaneously, everyone is going to roll with one of the 3 stats in the game, either focus, passion, or creativity. Remember, there are 4 stats in the game: focus, passion, creativity, and harmony. And which stat you roll with depends on whether you defended and maneuvered, if you advanced and attacked, or you evaded and observed. And certain playbooks, okay, are going to be better at certain types of combat exchanges. For example, the Hammer, which is the Korra playbook, she doesn't have a good focus. She's not very good at defending and maneuvering, but she's got a really high passion. And so she's really good at advancing and attacking. And if you've seen the show, you know that Korra is kind of a hothead and she's not likely to sit back and wait, right? Whereas we can clearly see that Aang has a very high creativity, and Aang also probably has a really high harmony. So Aang is really good at evading and observing. And we see this again and again with his character in what he does in these combat exchanges. So each character chooses a stance, rolls their dice, again, all simultaneously. And here is the true mastery of this. And unless you've played a lot of PBTA, you won't understand it. Okay, here it is. You're going to roll with focus. If you defend and maneuver, you're going to roll with passion, and if you advance and attack. And if you evade and observe, you're going to roll with creativity or harmony. On a 7 to 9, you get to use 1 basic or 1 mastered technique. If you roll a 10 or higher, you get to choose 1 from this list. You can either use Mark of Fatigue and use a learned technique. You can use a practice technique, or you can use 2 basic or mastered techniques. So if you roll a 10 or higher, you kind of, you get to use potentially one of your more challenging techniques, or you get to use 2 techniques. If you roll a 7, 8, or 9, you still get to use a technique, but it's just basic. On a miss, you stumble, but you can shift your balance away from center to use 1 basic technique. So why is this so revolutionary? Because, and again, there might be other ones out there. If there are, I don't know them. This is the only move in PBTA that I'm aware of that never involves the GM. Everything on this move, the stance move, is player facing. That means that, number 1, all the players can do this simultaneously. Number 2, even if a player rolls a 6-, aka a miss, if you look at most moves, it won't even say what happens on a miss because there isn't rules text for that. The rules text for if you roll a 6 or minus is the GM makes a move. The stance move is not like that. The GM does not make a move if you roll a 6-, aka a miss, on the stance move. So each player chooses a stance, rolls with their stat, sees what they get, and picks one of these options. And if they do roll a 6-, then they can choose to shift their balance away from center, and then they still get to use a technique in that combat exchange. If they're very close to the edge, they might choose not to. They might choose to sit out because they're not able, for that combat exchange. But the most important part here is everybody can do this simultaneously, and it doesn't cause the cascading spiral of GM moves or even 7, 8, 9 moves that can happen as a result of normal PBTA moves. And so what this means, and by the way, we'll get into a little bit of them, but when you use a technique, okay, all these things say you get to use a technique. You get to use a basic technique or a practice technique. Okay, well, what's a basic technique? Well, these are basic techniques. And let's take a look at like strike. Okay, strike a foe in reach, forcing them to mark 2 fatigue or mark a condition or shift their balance away from center. It's their choice. You can mark a fatigue yourself to instead choose to hammer them with your blows, forcing them to mark 2 fatigue, or strike where they're weak, and you get to choose to inflict a condition. There's choices here, but there's no dice rolls. All techniques, once you roll this stance move, and again, everybody's doing that simultaneously, and it involves no GM moves, and then everybody just picks their techniques that they're going to use. And you might have to make some choices, but there's no dice rolling. So everything just happens. And that means that this combat exchange goes remarkably fast and can go remarkably fast. And instead, you guys, obviously, you still want to describe it in the narrative, but this is a little bit more gamey than we are used to seeing in a PBTA game. But it is for a reason. And I know a lot of people got down on this, but the reason is that when you try to have a group of 4 or 5 people, all of whom are martial arts elemental badasses, and everybody wants to make a move, when everybody is rolling their moves and they're rolling them one at a time, and some of them are rolling 6-, and the GM has to make a move, a hard move, a soft move, moves that follow the fiction, fail forward, it can just quickly get out of control. This allows you to, in very short order, everybody rolls simultaneously, no GM moves are made, everybody finds out what kind of technique they can use that turn, and then you just pick one and apply the effects. That's it. There's no further dice rolling. And remember, the NPCs don't even roll dice. So it just goes bada, 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 bada. And then the combat exchange is over, and we go back into normal PBTA mode, where we're back in the conversation. And the impact of what just happened in the combat exchange is still true. Let's say, our characters are sort of trying to work it out, and they're like, they're talking to the Fire Nation person, and they're like, it doesn't have to go like this, it doesn't have to be this way. And he's like, you're coming with us, or else. And it's like, I'm not going to let you touch I'm not going to let you hurt my friends. And I go, okay, you're not budging, he's not budging. Let's do a combat exchange. So we go ahead and we do a combat exchange. And I decide that the Fire Nation person is going to strike you. So I describe how the Fire Nation is throwing blasts of flames, a big, huge gout of, flamethrower across your position. And I say, okay, PC, mark to fatigue, mark a condition, or shift your balance away from center. You get to pick. And the PC goes, like, what do I want to pick? Do I want to pick, do I want to shift my balance? Maybe. Do I want to mark a condition? Again, and when I do that, it could be a great moment for a storytelling moment. So like I described that, like, my character, falls back from the fuselage of fire. And I'm reminded of the night that the Fire Nation came and destroyed my village. And I go, I'm going to mark afraid. Right? Think about it this way. It's like in the game terms, a Fire Nation bender was throwing flamethrowers at me and quote unquote hit, because there's no missing or hitting. And the result was, it's not that I took damage. It's not that I'm on fire. It's not that I have persistent fire damage. The effect was I became afraid. So something like a physical attack led to an emotional impact. And that should tell you a lot about this game. This game is not about the physical. It is about the emotional. It's about the balance. It's about how your character is feeling right now. And so when that combat exchange ends, okay, and we go back into the normal PBTA conversation, I am now afraid as a result of that, Fire Nation person blasting that fire, and maybe we can roll, and that's a great role-playing cue for you as a PC. And, as me as a GM, I might say, the Fire Nation bender sneers and he goes, "What's wrong, kid? Can't stand the heat?" And your character might not go, like, "Oh, fuck you, I'm totally fine." You're like, "No, my character has afraid marked. My character's got a penalty if I was trying to intimidate someone right now." It shows. And I might describe how my character starts to, back away and is like, "No, please, just leave me alone." Right? Because that's part of our conversation. And we might go into another combat exchange depending on what happens during that conversation, or we might not. The combat exchange is just like one move that we normally make in a PBTA game, but it's like one big move and everybody gets to take it simultaneously. So that way everybody gets to feel like they're part of the action. Because normally in PBTA, all the moves are done one PC at a time. The combat exchange is like a big meta move that allows everybody a chance to do something and then process it efficiently without overloading the PCs or overloading the GM especially, or creating a death spiral situation. And then we can get back to the fiction. And instead of having to make 4 different moves in the conversation, like we would say in Dungeon World, we make this kind of one big meta move, the combat exchange. Everybody makes their stance move simultaneously. We resolve it in order, and then we apply the effects, and then we go back to the conversation. So it's like we're having the conversation, we're talking, and then there's the montage scene real quick of the fight, or at least the first part of the fight. Cut to Katara whipping the water. Cut to Aang scooting around on an air scooter and zipping up a wall. Cut to the Fire Nations, blast, 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 and Sokka's boomerang comes in and knocks one of them on the head, right? Cut to Toph, who, takes a boulder, raises it up, and throws it, crushing, one of the Fire Nation person who goes, help, and he's stuck underneath in the rock at the ground. And then we go back to the combat, and then we go back to the conversation. It's like that quick little montage is represented by one combat exchange. And whereas a normal combat round in an RPG might take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and in PBTA it can take just as long, we might be able to resolve that whole combat round, combat exchange, in 5 minutes, because everybody's kind of acting simultaneously. And once those initial dice rolls are made, none of which involve the GM, and they can all be made simultaneously, all the moves are just decisions. They're not actually any further dice rolling. There's no rolling for damage. There's no doing this. There's no doing that. And that's a very powerful tool. Oh, and it is 8:58. So we have finished perfectly on the dot. That's pretty good. So I wanted to talk today about balance moves. I wanted to talk about Avatar combat system and why I understand why some people are resistant to it, but I got to be honest with you, it really does solve a problem that has come up again and again. And I have to imagine that the folks over at Magpie have probably learned the same lessons that I have. And this was a great way for them to solve it. And I get it. It's a little bit more gamey than we're used to seeing in an Avatar game, but I think it is a tremendous opportunity for storytelling. And I think it's a great way to sort of cut into that, montage scene and just describe really quick your character's cool bending martial arts moment. And then we go back to the conversation and everybody gets to do something and it doesn't destroy the game. That being said, the game is all about balance. And you can even see that even the combat moves can influence balance. Did you see that? Right? The strike, which is like the basic damage. The strike can deal 2 fatigue or a condition, or it can shift your balance. And that's up to you, the player, to decide. So, maybe my character, right? Maybe we're Toph, right? Toph had the principles of excellence and community. Maybe the guy is attacking with fire and I am hit. And as Toph, I go, you know what? I'm going to shift my balance towards community. I'm worried. And everyone goes, oh, why? And Toph goes, I'm worried about my friends. I'm not just thinking about myself in this moment. I'm worried about my friends getting hurt. And that's a moment for me. That's a balance shifting moment for me. And everybody, here's the thing. You don't have to have that conversation in character, right? That's just something that you and the players are sharing with each other. It's something that when you're watching the show, right? There would be that scene where they would show Toph and you would see her seeing, Katara or Sokka under Fire Nation attack, and Toph, very quietly to herself would be like, no, right? We can have those moments, those small, intimate character moments. And I think that'd be amazing. Jackal, could you go into how you'd begin a first session of GMing this game / PBTA games in general? I want to GM Ken Elder, but my F20 brain is having a hard time figuring out how I would start. Well, I mean, Jackal, I think the simplest answer is, you got to do it. I think the best way to do it is to do a collaborative game build. I mean, the Avatar Legends RPG itself has rules for basically the first session. You and your group get together and just talk out what your first adventure was together, so that when the game starts, everybody knows each other. You've already got this kind of back history. I think you could do that. You could also use those backstory cards from Galileo Games, right? These ones. What do you got for me? Backstory cards. And you could play a couple of rounds of this and decide how your characters are kind of interconnected. Because you got to know the stakes. You got to know what's up. It's about the character interaction. You got to have those threads, those strings, so that you can push and pull on each other. Ikemos, does anybody have a good live play example for PBTA games involving combat and adventuring? Whenever Derek describes it, it sounds super cool, but I can't imagine how it would play on practice. I mean, our root actual play. I mean, there was definitely fights in that. I don't know if it was adventuring so much as it was controlled terrorism. But and Root's a PBTA game. So NPCs create pressure on the PCs by making techniques without rolling. So you could ostensibly create an unbalanced encounter by throwing too many enemies at them, unlike all other PBTAs. No, I don't think that's true. I mean, yes, you could throw a bunch of NPCs at them, but the way the game works is they would get grouped into a group. I mean, unless you had like 5 master villains, which would not go into group. But if I had like a Fire Nation patrol, it would not be 5 Fire Nations soldiers with 5 different techniques. It would be 1 Fire Nation patrol, and you would use the group. You would use the group sheet. Let me show you. So you can see here. A small group of 5 to 10 NPCs can be statted as a single NPC, one step above the individual members of importance, aka a small group of minor NPCs is equivalent to a major NPC. So what we could do is we could say, okay, well, this like squad of Fire Nation, Marines is a normally minor NPC. So we are going to stat them out instead of as a minor NPC. We are going to stat them out as a major NPC, and we're going to check mark the group box. We'll give them a name, Fire Nation Marines. What training are they in? Firebending. What's their drive? To obey or something like that. What's their principle? Conquest. And then, what techniques do we have? We can give them like, fire blast or something from the back of the book. And that's it. And that's our Fire Nation patrol. And that way it's not, as you pointed out, just spam a lot. All right. Your cards came with a box, frowny face. Well, I bought my cards from the booth at like Gen Con or something. So yes, they came in a box. I actually bought them off of like the rack, Root. That's right. Now, granted, Root has some of its own unique takeaways, but Root is more like a traditional PBTA game in that combat is, everybody has their own move, My favorite Avatar Legends actual play is Imp Tab, Avatar 10,000 Things by Improv Tabletop. I do not know them, but I imagine there's some stuff out there. Beowulf. The battle move from Starforge is also good. You're abstracting the entire battle in a single roll. And I know some people don't like that, but here's the beautiful thing about the combat exchanges. You're not doing that. You are abstracting that combat exchange, right? You're abstracting that brief, 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds of screen time where you get to see everybody do their cool little maneuver or move or thing. And then we get back into the conversation. So it's still abstracting it, but it's doing it in a very kind of stepwise fashion, which I like a lot. Because again, my experience has been when I run like Blades in the Dark, if I want to have a fight between the PCs and the NPCs, I don't have everybody roll individual moves. I make it one group check. I go, okay, who's taking point here? Who's leading? I was like, hey, you're the one who started this fight. You're the leader. And everybody else will roll and we'll see what they get. And that's it. Like for me, when I play like Blades in the Dark, it's one and done. One roll and I'm done. Now with Avatar Legends, look, part of Avatar Legends is, people finding balance within themselves and learning how to, deal with that. But also part of it is, you're a cool bender. And so to just completely gloss over the fact that your character can lightning bend or metal bend or create a cool earth armor suit around you, I think is doing a disservice to the source medium that is Avatar. And so I think that, again, just like the Root tabletop role-playing game was trying to create an emulation of the Root board game experience of playing the Vagabond faction, the purpose or point of the Avatar Legends RPG is something that uses its conditions, its balance, its stats, its statuses, its combat exchanges to create gameplay that when you and your group look back on it will go, wow, that felt like an episode of Avatar Last Airbender or Avatar Legend of Korra. In fact, last year at Origins Game Fair, I sat down with a number of patrons, including Stephen Glicker from Roll for Combat, who had never played PBTA games before, some of whom who had played PBTA games before, but no one had ever played Avatar. We sat down, everybody made characters. We had way too many PCs, but we made it work. And we played for, 3 or 4 hours, maybe, give or take, minus the character creation. So probably only 3 hours. And Sean, I was just about to shout you out. Sean was there and he showed up a little late. I don't remember if you were sleeping or if you were drinking. Maybe you were doing both. Sean showed up a little late. So I was like, the table's already full. We're kind of already pushed to the max and we're started. So he understood. He was very magnanimous about it. And so he stuck around and watched. And at the end, everybody was like, wow, that was really cool. And Sean, who was completely just an observer, basically said, yeah, that was really cool. That felt like an episode of Avatar. There was kind of the A plot, the B plot, maybe a little bit of a C plot. Each character kind of had a growth arc throughout the episode. And the final conclusion was very much towards building towards harmony, building towards balance, building towards peace. And so Sean said it felt like watching an episode of Avatar. And I took that as a very nice, I mean, not just for me compliment, but for the people, many of whom had never played a PBTA game before, to sit down and again, it's a compliment to the people playing. So shout out to the patrons, shout out to Bob and Smith, shout out to Mr. Glicker, but it's also a testament to the game. Okay. I got to give some credit to the game. The game itself is very good at producing those outcomes if you know how to do it. So, Beowulf, I don't think I would. I still don't think I would do that. I think that the heart of Avatar is in the conversations, but yeah, I mean, maybe if it's like the final battle and you want Aang and Ozai to be doing their thing over here, and you want Sokka and Toph and Suki to be doing their thing over here, and you want Zuko and Katara to be doing their thing on the other side of the planet. Yeah, maybe. And everyone can kind of basically be like, all right, like we understand these are three separate things. Yeah, I think it's fine. Listen, I meant more like drinking that led to sleeping. That's what I meant. Drinking that led to sleeping. So yeah, well, couple cool things. Number one, we had our tip goal, which is amazing. So we are going to, so big shout out to Cal and to Francois for the super chats. Amazing. Thank you. But shout out to GM Scott, Voyne, and Scott P for supporting the tip goal and starting an AD&D second edition campaign series. I'm really excited about this. I think we're getting a lot of fun nostalgia here. I also am going to have an opportunity to crack open some of the second edition box sets. I'll have to track down the PDFs, of course. I own a good number of these box sets, so I may have to like dig into my closet and find them, but I should have a number of them. But it'll be fun with you all to sort of show you, what went into these campaign box sets and oh yeah. Birthright is what started this whole conversation, Beowulf. Earlier today on the Patreon, we were talking in the Dragonbane channel, and somehow Birthright got brought up, and we were talking about Birthright, and I was like, yeah, it sucked. Like I never got a chance to play it. My friend owned it, but he never started a campaign. And then, second edition was dead, and we were moving on to third edition, and it never came back. And I was like, man, yeah, it'd be cool to, it'd be cool for me to go. I know the gist of Birthright, but I don't know the specifics of it. But I was like, yeah, I want to go in and dig into that and really see what's going on with it. So that is the plan. We're going to do Dark Sun. We're going to do Birthright, Planescape, but we're also throwing out things like Mystara, Forgotten Realms, Al-Qadim, right? Karatur, just some really cool stuff. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. So, and we might, this might take us the rest of the year. Maybe we'll do one campaign setting a month or something like that. We won't hammer it like we did when we were doing like all spells ranked or all archetypes ranked. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming out for this super secret Sunday system stream. We had about 50 to 60 people tonight. So I consider that I consider this an absolute win. And we even hit a tip goal. So I love that you guys came out to support this. If you want to talk more PBTA and Avatar, hit me up on the Patreon. If you're not a member of the Patreon, you can join. We can talk PBTA. I can answer questions. I'm trying to figure out a way that I can maybe do some PBTA workshops or something. I got to figure out something for the group because there's a lot of people who are really interested in PBTA but are still struggling with it. And I think it is reasonable to be confused. But I think if you can master it, it's a really powerful system, family of systems. So, all right, I think that's going to do it for me. It's Sunday night. We all have work tomorrow. But the good news is, it should be a fairly easy week for me. And my bosses are going to be traveling and all this other stuff. So hopefully I won't have too much work to do. So we'll be back Tuesday and Thursday. Of course, we are here every Tuesday and Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern daylight time, because we are now daylight savings time as of yesterday. So it might be a little bit off for some people who don't have that. Red Matter says, thanks for the stream. Awesome stuff. Thank you. Beowulf, you are quite welcome. Beowulf was asking for this stream for a little bit of while. Boothby shouting out Birthright. Yeah, I'm excited to dig into it. And Jorge says, I was waiting for the next episode of Avatar and PBTA since the last one a few months ago. Happy I was to catch the stream. Perfect. And there's still a little bit more that we could talk about with Avatar, I think, but so there might be a part 3 at some point. But again, I think the game has a lot of promise, and it's definitely one of the PBTA games that I am most excited to get to find an opportunity to play. So definitely looking for an opportunity to play it with my patrons. Pepper, I feel exactly the same way. $5 super chat from our good friend Pepper says, I love this game. Maybe one day I'll actually be able to play it. Yeah, exactly. And I think you could do it easily too, as like PBTA games aren't really good for the long haul anyways. So if you put together a 15, 12, 10, 7, 5 session game, I think that you can tell a pretty compelling story. So I think that's really great. Thank you, Pepper, for that. Late to the party. We wrapping up. We sure are, London. I am just about to hit the button. So that's all right, London. It's a good stream. I think you'll enjoy the VOD. Okay. Well, if you're in my masks book isn't even that far from me. The thing about it, Pepper, is obviously Avatar very it's from Magpie, right? Each Magpie game is like an evolution. So, they did Masks, and then they did Root, and then they did Avatar. And Avatar, in my experience, has elements of Root, but it also has a lot of elements of Masks. Lots of elements of Masks. But there are some things in Avatar, because, it's later tech, that I wish were kind of in, the Masks game, for sure. But my love for the Masks game has more to do with the fact that it is superheroes, which I love. But it explicitly states that part of their inspiration was Monster Hearts. And I love that they have like the grown-up moves, and I love that the tension of being a teenager but being super powerful. That seems to be a theme that Magpie really likes, because they did it with Masks, they did it with Avatar, and they really like Monster Hearts, which is the same basic idea. You're teenage monsters, and except here you're teenage superheroes. So I think that's a really fun, cool genre, even if you're an adult. So very awesome. But thank you, Pepper, for that. Thank you, everybody else, for showing up. Thank you to the patrons of Night's Last Call, particularly our Legends and Exalted members who so generously donate their cash and money. All of our patrons, but special shout out to them for their high levels of donation. But you know what? If you join as a Squire and you're a $3 a month member, you are in the top 1% of people who watch this channel who support us. Just because most people never give a single dollar to any of their content creators. So whether you've tipped once ever, whether you've thrown a super chat in, a super sticker, or you were a patron for 2 months at the $3 or $4, $5 level, my humble thanks to you, because it's because of people like you that I'm able to talk about masks on a Sunday night, and not focus just on 5e or basically 5e, but maybe Pathfinder. But we can talk about these other games. We can learn from these other games, and I think that's really awesome. It's really valuable. London with $2 is going to send us out. Mr. Lund, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to London and the rest of you on the Discord. Hopefully, we'll see you in the Patreon. If not, we'll see you next time on Nights of Last Call. Good night, everybody. Peace.